Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. As we approach another college football season, we're going to take a trip back to 5 years ago. As fans were set to return to the stands after a year away, Purdue entered a very critical 2021 season, and it delivered. Purdue won 9 games that year, the only time in the last 20 years that Purdue has put 9 wins on the board. And today we're going to dive into that year, look at how Purdue did it, and look at what from that season remains relevant today. If you don't already, be sure to follow on Twitter at Boilers Beyond. All things Purdue sports we're talking about there. Come join the conversation. You can always send over questions. Do it on Twitter at Boilers Beyond. Email the show, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. And be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Got a lot of fun stuff coming up. We'll have Bobby Buckets Riddell on the show next week, talking Purdue hoops. Lots of Purdue football preview content. I'm really looking forward to that. We'll be here every week from now all the way through the end of basketball season and beyond. Be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss a thing. But 5 years ago, Purdue was entering a really interesting spot because the season didn't start with great expectations. Out in Vegas, Purdue's over-under win total was just 5.5, but it turned into the best season that Purdue has had since Joe Tiller roamed the sideline and since Kyle Orton was under center back in 2003. As you look back, it's a really interesting time. The Jeff Brom era was a really interesting time of Purdue football because you could not have asked for a more exciting, roaring 13-13 start. The 2017 season was the most glorious 6-6 year you could imagine. Purdue wins the bowl game. Purdue wins 7 games in that year after winning just 9 over the previous 4 years. It was euphoria in West Lafayette. The scene on the field after the last home game, Purdue beats Indiana for the first time in 4 years, snaps a 4-game losing streak. Purdue's going to a bowl game after 4 years of nothing better than 3-9. Came out of nowhere against a really difficult schedule. It was awesome for Purdue fans. And then 2018 starts really slow. Purdue loses its first 3 games. It loses a Thursday night marquee opener against Northwestern. Eastern Michigan comes in the pouring rain and stuns Purdue. And then just an absolute shootout against Barry Odom in Missouri doesn't go Purdue's way. Purdue loses that game, and you're wondering where Purdue's going. But then Purdue rips off 6 of its last 9 games. It beats Ohio State. It beats a ranked Iowa team. It beats Indiana again and goes back to a bowl game. And at this time, Purdue was recruiting fairly well. You look at some exciting commitments. It gets Rondale Moore, and he delivers right away. David Bell, George Karlaftis, 2 massive in-state recruiting wins for Purdue. But then 2019 and 2020 didn't go well. 2019 was marred by injuries. Purdue got off to a terrible note when it lost the season opener out at Nevada. Purdue just completely faded down the stretch, playing at the altitude. Elijah Sindelar throws a bad pick that costs Purdue the game late. And then from that point on, the injuries just did Purdue in. Elijah Sindelar misses the TCU game. Purdue gets pounded. Then Sindelar and Rondale Moore both get hurt on the same play against Minnesota. Sindelar's out for the year. Moore never returns to the field. And it became a lost season to a certain degree, and Purdue made the most of it. We'll talk about it later, but Purdue played a ton of young guys. You look at Marvin Grant, Jalen Graham, Corey Trice, George Karlaftis, Branson Dean, David Bell, all these guys that had to get action before they were really ready for it. In 2020, in hindsight, we know that the 2020 year was a complete aberration. Things you saw just weren't real that season, especially with how the Big Ten completely botched the handling of that season. The Big Ten put an effort into playing but did not put a whole lot of logistical thought into it. It was just a jumbled mess. And Purdue goes 2-4. It loses its last 4 games. The defense just completely fell apart late in the season. Bob Diaco gets fired as the defensive coordinator after 4 games. The will he or won't he play with Rondale Moore was a distraction, if nothing else. He sits the first 3 games, then plays the last 3 games after publicly going on ESPN and opting into the season. It was just really weird, but at this point, the Jeff Brom honeymoon had worn off a little bit from the Purdue fan base. By no means was there any job pressure. A bad 2021 wasn't going to result in termination, but Purdue needed to get back to the postseason. Purdue needed the vibes to get revved back up a little bit in West Lafayette. And the storyline coming in was the quarterback battle, as it really was for much of Jeff Brom's tenure at Purdue. This was Jack Plummer versus Aiden O'Connell. Both of them had started some games in 2019. Each of them started 3 of the games in 2020. There really wasn't a ton of separation. Aiden O'Connell had been the season opening starter in 2020, and Purdue won 2 of those 3 games before he was hurt. Then Jack Plummer came in and played fairly well down the stretch, but Purdue did not win. Purdue was 0-3. Jack Plummer got the nod. And at the time, to show you what I know, I thought it was the right call. Now, a few things made that dynamic very different. You had a fairly heralded recruit against a former walk-on. And Jeff Brom was a quarterback guy. He always has been a quarterback guy. And his track record with quarterbacks is pretty solid. He hasn't really had bad offenses at Western Kentucky, at Purdue, or at Louisville. But this was Jeff Brom going with the guy he chose out of high school. Really the first quarterback recruit that he signed at Purdue. This was Jeff Brom going with the guy who had a little more mobility. Not that Jack Plummer was Michael Vick running around back there, but he did have the ability to extend plays more so than Aiden O'Connell. Even with all the success Aiden O'Connell had in playing in the NFL, he's not a runner. He's a pretty drop-back passer. There was a little more in-game experience to Jack Plummer, and that was how Purdue went, and it had a massive game to start things off with Oregon State coming to Ross-Ade, a night game. I wasn't able to be at that game. I was at a wedding that night, and I remember watching it on my phone. It looked like an awesome atmosphere. Fans super excited to be there, and Purdue got the win. Jack Plummer played pretty well. He threw for 300 yards. I remember Payne Durham having a long catch and run late to kind of seal the deal. I think Durham caught a couple of touchdowns in that game. But Purdue got off to a good start. And then Purdue blows out UConn. And the offense hums, 49-0 win there. But pretty quickly, it became evident that a move was coming at quarterback. And it happened quickly because in the game at UConn, Aiden O'Connell looked really good in the second half. And you never thought, oh, well, that's going to be it. But if you remember back to 2017, Elijah Sindelar and David Blau went back and forth a ton, before Purdue finally settled on David Blau for 1 game, and then he gets hurt. Elijah Sindelar finishes the year. Sindelar was the guy to start 2018. But he threw, I believe, 3 interceptions in the first half against Northwestern in the season opener. Had a rough day against Eastern Michigan in the rain. And then for the rest of the year, it was David Blau's show. A lot of instability followed. Sindelar gets hurt, then Plummer gets hurt, then O'Connell finishes the year. And then O'Connell starts 2020 and gets hurt, and Plummer finishes the year. As the Week 3 game in 2021 at Notre Dame came along, this was where the dominoes really began to fall. And for Purdue, it was a really monumental moment because Aiden O'Connell got his shot. Purdue was right in that game at Notre Dame. I remember sitting in the end zone, and Purdue was moving the football well. Purdue was getting the ball into Notre Dame territory, but it wasn't scoring. It wasn't capitalizing. And the offensive game plan, or at least the decisions that were made with the football, were ultra conservative. It gets to the point where Purdue makes the move to Aiden O'Connell, and it ultimately didn't work out. A couple of picks were thrown, one of them, though, right off of Payne Durham's hands into the Notre Dame defender's arms that really probably should have been a touchdown for Purdue to give Purdue a fighting chance late. But Purdue loses there, and you have some questions, but Purdue's going to roll with Jack Plummer again. And then it plays Illinois. And it plays Ryan Walters' defense that in Brett Bielema's, I believe that was his first year at Illinois. Not a great Illinois team, but a plucky team. And Purdue's offense struggles massively. It goes to Aiden O'Connell in the second half. I remember an interception thrown in the end zone. But finally, O'Connell finds TJ Sheffield for a touchdown. Purdue wins 13-9 over Illinois. And that was it. Purdue had made a quarterback change. Jack Plummer was benched. Aiden O'Connell was going to be the guy for the rest of the season. But it didn't start ceremoniously from there. It's a pouring rain day in West Lafayette for homecoming, Purdue versus Minnesota. Purdue's wearing some hideous gold uniforms. And Purdue puts up 448 yards of offense. But it only musters 13 points. Purdue loses 20-13 to Minnesota. And at this point, Purdue's going into its bye week. It's 3-2. Its last three performances haven't inspired a lot of confidence on offense. You're not feeling great about where Purdue is. You're not feeling great about this team with a second half schedule that looked daunting. Iowa was good. Michigan State was on its way to a good year. You have Ohio State. Nebraska was Nebraska at this time, but Nebraska was supposed to be better that year, and Indiana came in with high expectations. You just weren't sure where all of this was going to go for Purdue. Wisconsin was looming. And while Purdue was on its bye week, it saw Iowa win a massive game at home. Penn State was a top 5 team. Iowa beats them in Kinnick Stadium. Iowa's number 2 in the AP poll when Purdue goes up there. I think on paper, Iowa was far, it was a little bit overvalued. It beat an Indiana team in the opener that was a top 25 team coming in, but finished 2-10. Iowa State was a top 10 team when Iowa won that game. Iowa State finished 7-5. In the Penn State game, it knocked out Sean Clifford. I remember Taquan Roberson, I think was his name, comes in for Penn State, and he couldn't throw the football. It became a true Spider-Man pointing at each other meme with neither Iowa nor Penn State able to throw the football. But Iowa's 6-0. And I say all that to preface that it's not like it dismisses what Purdue did at Iowa, but it does provide some context. Not every top 5 win is created equally. This was by no means on the same level as Purdue dismantling Ohio State in 2018. But Purdue wins the game 24-7. The game was as much of a blowout as the score indicated. Purdue outgains Iowa by 200 yards. Aiden O'Connell racks up 375 through the air. 240 of those go to David Bell. This was the famous game where Purdue played 3 quarterbacks. Little caveat, because Aiden O'Connell took almost every snap, but Jack Plummer and Austin Burton both came in at times, and usually to run the ball. You look back, David Bell's numbers against Iowa were just ridiculous. I mean, that dude dismantled Iowa. In this game, Spencer Petras, Iowa's quarterback, throws 4 interceptions, and Purdue really is the talk of the day in college football. It was just a glorious win for Purdue. You have the infamous picture of offensive lineman Greg Long chugging a aluminum pint of Bud Light that someone must have thrown on the field, branded with the Iowa logo. And Purdue's on cloud 9. Purdue's 4-2. It didn't last long because Wisconsin was on deck. And as we sit here in 2026, we all know what Purdue's history is against Wisconsin. It's been 23 years since Purdue went up to Camp Randall Stadium and won in 2003. But Purdue lays an egg there. 30-13. O'Connell throws 3 picks. Half of Purdue's points came on a scoop and score by George Karlaftis. Purdue got rolled. Purdue ran for negative yards in that game. And it's unbelievable when you look at this season what Purdue did with a terrible rushing attack. You got a 3-headed monster at running back of King Doru, Xander Horvath, and Dylan Downing. There are some names you probably didn't think you were going to hear again. Purdue didn't run the ball well. Purdue couldn't run the ball that year, yet it didn't matter. Purdue still had a really nice season. And after that loss to Wisconsin, Purdue hit the ground running. It was 4-3. 4-3. And it finishes 8-4 with the only loss coming at Ohio State. Purdue was a touchdown underdog at Nebraska. It picks off Adrian Martinez 4 times. Purdue wins. Purdue comes home to beat another top 5 team. Michigan State was number 3, undefeated. Kenneth Walker's putting together a Heisman campaign. Purdue did just enough to slow Kenneth Walker down. Aiden O'Connell throws for 536 yards in this game. And it's a game that Purdue should have won by more. Late in that game, Purdue settled for 4 field goals inside of 30 yards. If Purdue punches those in, you're looking at Purdue hanging 55 points on Michigan State. It was another really memorable moment. You have the field rushed, everyone's fired up, everyone's happy. Purdue wins. Second top 5 win of the season. And this was a bigger one. This was a big one. This was an 8-0 maybe Michigan State team at the time. It lost a little bit of its luster a week or two later when Ohio State was up like 49-0 on Michigan State at halftime. But it was another great memory. And it was Purdue being relevant on the national stage again. Because I want to say that was a 3:30 game on ABC. Pretty big national scale for Purdue to win on. And Purdue went to Ohio State and got splattered. The game was over as soon as it started. I was sitting in the horseshoe for that one. It wasn't a game. Purdue got blown out of that. But it finishes strong. Purdue goes to Wrigley Field to play Northwestern, and just an awesome day for Purdue fans. Purdue rolls through Northwestern. O'Connell throws for 423. Milton Wright has a career day, over 200 yards, 3 touchdown catches. And then Purdue fans file out of Wrigley into the Wrigleyville bars to watch Purdue basketball beat UNC at the Mohegan Sun event as Purdue basketball was on its way to being ranked number 1 in the country. That was an awesome day for Purdue fans. And Purdue comes home to wrap up the regular season, and it just splatters Indiana 44-7. The Hoosiers entered that season with a lot of momentum. Again, you look back, and what Tom Allen accomplished in 2020 was a little bit of fool's gold because his next 3 teams at Indiana all stunk. Indiana came into that year ranked in the top 15, top 20, top 25, and the only 2 wins were against Idaho and Western Kentucky. And that Western Kentucky game was like a 2-point win. Bad Indiana team. Purdue splatters them. Feels like it's regaining some momentum in the state. And it goes to a bowl game where, I didn't remember this, but I guess Purdue was a 7.5-point underdog to Tennessee in the Music City Bowl. The bowl game was fun. It was an incredible win for Purdue. It is always fun for fans to go to a bowl game and win. The Big Ten and SEC debate has been on fire for 20 years now. That was part of it. Purdue had gone to the Music City Bowl 3 years earlier and been absolutely pantsed by Auburn. This time Purdue goes in and beats Tennessee and survives a bunch of punches to do so. Tennessee was up early in that game, had a couple explosive touchdowns, and it felt like deja vu. Purdue kept fighting back, and it was an incredible Herculean effort for Purdue to win that game. But it was also instructive. George Karlaftis and David Bell opted out of that bowl game real quick. And you saw the year after when Purdue was in just the worst spot possible going into a bowl game to play a team it really had no business playing. Purdue's 5 best players all opted out. And it's not to say that bowl games don't matter. Try telling that to any Purdue fan that was in Nissan Stadium on that day, dealing with Tennessee fans. It was something that mattered. But it also only mattered to a degree. I've never been one that feels like bowl games mean a ton, because after all, even in the heyday of bowl games, what have they always been? They've always been an exhibition. You don't get a boost for the next season. You don't get a win for the next season added because you won a bowl game. It's a celebration of your season. They're fun. I love bowl games. I love sitting down and watching them, but it's not like they mean a ton. And you almost wonder, no matter what the future holds for Purdue football, was this the last time that Purdue went to a bowl game that's not affiliated with a playoff, if Purdue ever gets to that point, but was this the last time that Purdue ever went to a bowl game and you really felt like the win was really meaningful, really exciting? I don't know. But as the sport continues to move into a mega playoff structure, it doesn't present a great feeling for the future of bowl games. But nonetheless, Purdue finished the season 9-4. And as you look at what Purdue has done, there have not been a whole lot of Purdue seasons where it's won 9 games. You think about the Rose Bowl season in 2000. Purdue didn't win 9 games that year. Purdue only won 8. 2003, that was probably the most talented team Joe Tiller ever had. Didn't have Drew Brees at quarterback. That team won 9 games. The first 2 teams under Tiller, 9 games. Both those teams won a bowl game as well. Before that, you're going back to 1979. Purdue's only 10-win season in 1980. So really, in over the last 40 years of Purdue football, there have only been 4 seasons where Purdue has won 9 games. This was one of them. It was an accomplishment. And you look at the team. You had 7 major players on that team who got drafted out of Purdue. You had George Karlaftis, David Bell, Xander Horvath was a 7th-round pick, Corey Trice, Aiden O'Connell, Jalen Graham, Payne Durham. All of those guys got drafted. All of those guys were key contributors on this team. You think about Purdue hitting on its big recruits, too. That's part of it. Football recruiting is a tricky game because it's the ultimate game of numbers, but when you hit on your biggest recruits, it makes things a lot easier. And look back at this group. George Karlaftis, David Bell, massive recruits from the state of Indiana, big-time players for Purdue on this team. Milton Wright was a really good get, wide receiver. Big-time get, 4-star recruit. He was a really good player for this team. Marvin Grant, starter on defense at safety. He was a 4-star recruit. Some of Purdue's biggest recruits that it landed were really big difference makers on the team. And again, Purdue made the most of that 2019 season because the season was ugly. The season got out of hand really quick. I remember Jack Plummer making a start at Penn State against a good Penn State team, and Purdue just got humiliated. You won a game against Northwestern late. You won a game against Nebraska at home, but it wasn't a good season. But Purdue made the most of it. Those guys made big impacts on the 2021 team. Jalen Alexander, Dedrick Mackey, Jalen Graham, Corey Trice, Cam Allen, Lawrence Johnson, Branson Dean, David Bell, Xander Horvath, both Jack Plummer and Aiden O'Connell. These guys all probably got experience in 2019 before they were ready, but that experience made them ready for 2021. That was Purdue making the most of a lost year. What's the lesson from it? This was quintessential Purdue. Just chucking it around and seeing what happened. This Purdue team threw the ball like crazy. As we've established, this team couldn't run the ball. It wasn't good at it. It could not run. But it didn't matter. Purdue threw it around a bunch. David Bell had a big year. Milton Wright, Jackson Anthrop, Payne Durham had a good year. TJ Sheffield had a good year. Brock Thompson, massive in the bowl game. The pass rush was solid on defense, and that made a difference. Purdue was fun. It was aggressive on both sides of the ball. Historically, that's what has won at Purdue. I'm not saying that's the only way you can possibly win at Purdue, but historically, being aggressive on both sides of the ball. You got the cradle of quarterbacks, you got the den of defensive ends. That's what's won at Purdue. Aggressive football can win when you're the underdog with lesser of a talent profile. And in that year, Purdue was an underdog against Iowa, Nebraska, Michigan State, Tennessee. It won all of those games. All of them. But as they say, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And you look back, and playing Notre Dame was a bit of a conundrum for that season. The way the sport was at that time, it wasn't a huge deal because Purdue wasn't going to make a 4-team playoff. But now, as you start to think about the sport going to a 24-team playoff, and here in a couple of weeks at Big Ten Media Days, you're going to hear a lot of it from Tony Petitti, probably a lot of coaches in the Big Ten pushing for a 24-team playoff. Well, based on the college football playoff rankings, Purdue wouldn't have been in it this year. In 2021, even with an 8-4 record, Purdue wouldn't have been in it. Purdue took a loss to Notre Dame. Would Purdue have been in it had it played an easier opponent and finished 9-3? Of course, you got a lot of revisionist history. Does Purdue even get to the switch to Aiden O'Connell? Who knows? Who knows? But playing Notre Dame has really done Purdue absolutely nothing since that series was reignited in 2021. It's done a whole lot of nothing for Purdue other than get it splattered at Ross-Ade Stadium a couple years ago, and Notre Dame just lit Purdue's defense up last year in South Bend. We'll see. I think there are 3 more games left in the agreement. See if Purdue can compete in one of them. And you still have the Wisconsin problem. Purdue's going to have its best chance in a while at Wisconsin this year in November. A little bit of a hot seat up there for Luke Fickell. A lot of questions. What's Wisconsin going to be like in November? Maybe Purdue can finally end that drought, because this was the Purdue team to do it. Against a Wisconsin team that wasn't very good, Wisconsin came into Ross-Ade and smothered Purdue. That was fun, though. That was fun. And I know Purdue fans, a lot of Purdue fans are bitter with the way Jeff Brom left. The fact that he left and just altogether, I think, frustrates a lot of people. I'll just say this. That was the right hire for Purdue at the right time. And Purdue football is a heck of a lot better off because it had the 6 years under Jeff Brom. Because when you look at your memories, when you look at the best moments of Purdue football in the last 20 years, outside of 2 Danny Hope wins over Ohio State, they've all been Jeff Brom. They've all been Jeff Brom. But that's what I've got for today, guys. Next week, as I said, Bobby Buckets Riddell joins the show. Looking forward to talking to him. Until then, stay cool out there. Enjoy the summer. Enjoy the heat if that's your prerogative. It's certainly not mine. But we'll talk to you next week. Take care.